So Sophie Cunningham is one of the biggest names in the WNBA. And as well as that, she's also one of the best glue guys, role players in the entire league.
Okay, this is wild. Caitlin Clark definitely didn't see this one coming. Just when the Indiana Fever were finally starting to click and find their rhythm on the court, Sophie Cunningham dropped an absolute bomb. It sent shockwaves through the entire locker room and the whole WNBA community. Honestly, it changed everything.
Sounds like the Indiana Fever are not going to keep Sophie Cunningham. It does sound like the Fever are not going to keep her. From her podcast, a lot of the time she'd been mentioning the Fever, and in the most recent podcast, she did not mention the Fever.
You won't believe this, but in her latest podcast, Sophie, that sharpshooting forward we all know, casually hinted she might be playing for a different team next season. Fans were absolutely stunned, right? Like, how could one of the team's hardest working, most loyal players even think about walking away? And here's the kicker. If Sophie's hint is true, it's not just about her. It might actually reveal a much deeper, much more serious problem brewing inside the Indiana Fever organization.
Cunningham is one of the biggest names in the WNBA. And as well as that, she's also one of the best glue guys, role players in the entire league.
So the podcast started pretty normal, just light banter, a few laughs, some personal updates. But then, completely out of nowhere, Sophie Cunningham dropped a line that made every single Caitlin Clark fan stop scrolling. She said, and I quote, "The next team I play for, I want a bigger contract, so I can finally buy a house and get cozy." And get this, she repeated it, sounding incredibly deliberate. This wasn't some slip-up or a joke. It was like she already knew her time in Indiana was winding down. Her tone? Super confident, almost detached. Not at all what you'd expect from a player supposedly returning to the Fever. You could even hear the other people on the podcast reacting, realizing the gravity of what she'd just said. Like, wow, that's crazy. It could be the Liberty, New York City, the Lynx, it could be anywhere. But here's the thing, Sophie had been one of the Fever's biggest cheerleaders. She always praised Caitlin Clark's leadership, Aaliyah Boston's maturity, and the team's chemistry, even after their rough start. She'd even called the Fever home in earlier episodes. But now, that warmth was gone. It sounded like she was already out the door. No shout-outs, no optimism for the future, just this chilling silence where pride used to be. Fans picked up on it instantly, flooding social media with theories. Was Sophie hinting that management had already told her she wasn't in their long-term plans? Or was she quietly negotiating for leverage? Whatever it was, the message was clear.
Sacrifice the 8th pick for a rental of a player that is coming off the best season of her career in her 20s that they don't want to keep. Like, this is the dumbest thing I think I've seen a team do.
And the timing. That's what makes this whole thing even more suspicious. Cunningham is coming off one of her absolute best seasons, right? We're talking about a 43% shooter from beyond the arc, one of the league's toughest defenders, and honestly, the emotional glue holding the Fever together. Losing her wouldn't just be a hit to the roster, it would completely shake the locker room dynamic that Caitlin Clark worked so hard to build. Yet despite all that, her words sounded incredibly final.
Like, genuinely. They traded 4 years of Sinai Rivers, and by the way, the Fever wouldn't have drafted Sinai Rivers. The Fever would not have drafted Sinai Rivers. The Fever are dumbasses. They would have drafted somebody else. But losing Sophie Cunningham for money reasons, is not a smart thing to do.
It was like she had already closed that chapter, and fans could totally feel it. This wasn't just a player dreaming about financial security. This felt like a goodbye, hidden in plain sight. But here's the kicker. The real question isn't why Sophie might leave. It's why the Fever, in their right mind, would ever let her go in the first place.
Logic for not keeping Sophie Cunningham is if Lexi Hull wants a max. An unpopular opinion, Sophie's better than Lexi. But it's close enough that fair enough, Lexi's younger. But I'm like, Lexi's not worth a max either. Like, if you're stuck in a situation where you've got two wings that are not max contract players looking for max contracts, and you have to pick one or the other, you're kind of screwed.
To truly understand why Sophie Cunningham's possible exit stings so much, we've got to rewind to the trade that originally brought her to Indiana. Get this, the Fever actually gave up their number 8 overall draft pick for her. That move absolutely shocked analysts at the time. I mean, giving away a top 8 pick is no small decision, especially in a league where rookie contracts are cheap and talent runs deep. But Indiana's front office insisted they were building for now, not later. They needed a proven shooter, a veteran presence, and someone who could immediately help Caitlin Clark transition into the league. Simple as that.
She's willing to take any role. And now she's talking about my next team. This sounds like a podcast of somebody that has just been told by the organization, we are not keeping you. Or, if this is what you want, we're not offering you what you want.
And for a while, honestly, that trade looked like a genius gamble. Sophie delivered everything they asked for. She played her role perfectly, brought absolute fire on defense, and became a fan favorite for her grit and unselfish play. She was exactly the kind of teammate who made life easier for Clark in Boston, someone who didn't need headlines, just wanted wins. Yet now, barely a year later, reports are screaming that Indiana might let her walk for nothing. The same player they spent a first-round pick to acquire could be gone without any return. And you better believe that decision has left fans absolutely furious. Social media is blowing up. Even diehard Fever supporters are calling this move a total disaster. Analysts are echoing that, saying this trade could go down as one of the worst in team history if she actually leaves. Because if you give up a valuable draft asset for a one-year rental, you're not just losing a player. You're torching your credibility. What's even worse is how completely unprepared the front office looks right now. There's no clear replacement, no backup plan for her insane production, and zero signs of a new deal being discussed. It's almost like they never expected her to play this well, or they totally underestimated how much she truly meant to the team. And if that's true, then Indiana didn't just mismanage a trade, they completely misread the heartbeat of their own locker room. But hold up, because behind Sophie Cunningham's subtle goodbye, there's a much bigger problem brewing. One that goes way beyond just money or contracts. It's the growing belief that the entire Indiana Fever system under head coach Stephanie White just isn't working the way it should. Think about it. For all of Caitlin Clark's brilliance and Aaliyah Boston's dominance, too many players around them seem stuck, not developing, and frankly, losing confidence. Analysts have been saying it for months. Indiana's young roster isn't being coached to its potential. And Sophie's sudden change in tone might be the clearest proof, yet of deeper frustration bubbling from within. Take KK Timpson, for example. The organization hoped she'd grow into a reliable rotation piece, but instead, she's regressed. Even overseas, her performances have been shaky. That's not just on the player. That's a reflection of the development strategy. When your bench talent stalls, your veterans are forced to carry even more weight. Sophie saw that firsthand all season. She played through nagging injuries, took on defensive matchups nobody else wanted, and still delivered night after night. Yet when it came time for extensions, the silence was absolutely deafening. Look, Caitlin Clark thrives in chaos. She finds ways to lead, push the tempo, and turn broken plays into highlight moments. But even her incredible energy can't hide the organizational disconnect. The Fever's rotations were inconsistent. Player roles shifted constantly, and it often looked like the coaching staff was improvising instead of strategically planning. For someone as professional and team-oriented as Sophie, that kind of instability absolutely wears you down. So when she spoke about wanting to settle down and find a home, it didn't sound like greed to me. It sounded like pure exhaustion. The words of a player completely tired of uncertainty. Because if Indiana can't create stability for veterans like her, what hope is there for the younger players still trying to find their place? Once you strip away the polite interviews and vague team statements, The real issue comes down to money and hierarchy. Sophie Cunningham wants to be valued like the consistent, high-impact player she's proven to be. The Indiana Fever, however, seem completely torn between paying her what she deserves and protecting the inflated contracts they've already handed out. And inside that tension lies the heart of the problem. League insiders are whispering that the Fever's cap space has grown super tight. With Natasha Howard on a max deal and Lexi Hull approaching extension talks, Indiana is basically boxed in. Both are solid players, sure, but the numbers don't lie. Sophie's efficiency and spacing have been the difference in multiple wins. She shot over 40% from deep, played elite perimeter defense, and never once demanded the ball. Yet somehow, she's the one left on the edge of the roster. For many fans, that feels completely backwards. Why reward players whose production dips while overlooking the one who quietly does it all? Some insiders even suggest politics might be at play, keeping veterans who align with the coaching staff's philosophy over those who might challenge it. Others believe it's just stubborn mismanagement, an organization that can't admit when it made the wrong financial bet. Sophie's comments about wanting a bigger contract weren't just about personal gain, they were about respect. After carrying heavy minutes and sacrificing touches so Clark and Boston could shine, she expected the franchise to invest back into her. Instead, she's hearing silence from the front office and whispers about other priorities. Caitlin Clark has built her entire brand on loyalty and competitiveness, and losing someone like Sophie, a teammate who bought in completely, could send an absolutely terrible message. It screams that hard work and chemistry don't matter as much as payroll politics. And that kind of message spreads fast, especially in a league built on trust and unity. Look, numbers tell part of Sophie Cunningham's story. But her true value goes way beyond the stat sheet. On paper, she's an incredible 43% three-point shooter, a top-tier perimeter defender, and a player who understands her role better than most. But within the Indiana Fever locker room, Sophie became something more. She was the emotional balance between fiery stars and quiet grinders. She was the one who kept the team grounded when tempers flared. The one calming Clark down or pushing teammates to refocus. That kind of voice is rare, especially on a young team where egos are still forming. That kind of leadership doesn't show up in a box score, but it's exactly what builds winning cultures. When Caitlin Clark joined the league, all eyes were on her. The pressure was enormous, the expectations sky-high. Sophie's ability to adapt instantly, providing both mentorship and crucial floor spacing, helped smooth that transition. She defended the toughest wings, set hard screens, and knocked down timely threes whenever the defense collapsed on Clark. In short, she did the dirty work, the kind of effort that turns superstars into winners. Analysts across the league have noted that Sophie embodies the modern WNBA wing prototype, efficient, tough, and team-oriented. She doesn't need the spotlight, but she thrives under it when necessary. That's why losing her for nothing feels less like a roster move and more like a self-inflicted wound. Players like her are rare. They combine humility with hunger, a mix that stabilizes a young team still finding its identity. Fans have already started comparing her to veterans like Bridget Carlton or Kayla McBride, players whose quiet excellence makes contenders consistent. The idea that Indiana might not even offer her a reasonable deal feels like a total betrayal of everything they've claimed to be building. So when Sophie said she wanted to buy a house and get cozy, it wasn't just about lifestyle, it was about finally being somewhere she could plant roots. Somewhere that truly valued what she brought beyond points and rebounds. And right now, it simply doesn't seem like Indiana is that place. The moment Sophie Cunningham hinted she might leave, fans across the league immediately started playing the guessing game. Where would she go? Which team would value her the way Indiana didn't? A few destinations instantly stood out, and each one could completely reshape her career. The New York Liberty would be a dream fit on paper. They have the star power, the market, and a system that thrives on shooters who can stretch the floor. Pairing Sophie with Sabrina Ionescu and Breanna Stewart would give New York even more offensive versatility. But there's a problem. The Liberty are tight on cap space. They'd need to move pieces, or rely on a sign-in trade to make it work. Still, Fans can't stop imagining her energy under those bright Madison Square Garden lights. Then there's the Minnesota Lynx, a team quietly rebuilding and in need of a veteran wing who leads by example. The Lynx have the culture, the coaching stability, and the salary space to give Sophie both a raise and a leadership role. Her blue-collar mindset would fit perfectly with their grinded-out identity. But the most intriguing possibility might just be an expansion team. The WNBA is preparing to add new franchises, and expansion teams will have open checkbooks, along with a desperate need for experienced leaders. A team like that could easily make Sophie a cornerstone signing, not just for her game, but for her incredible character. She could become the face of a new organization, something every player dreams about. Whichever team lands her won't just be getting a shooter, they'll be getting a culture builder. And that's what makes this story sting so deeply for Indiana fans. Losing Sophie doesn't just create a hole in the roster, it creates a void in leadership, in chemistry, in trust. Because wherever Sophie ends up next season, one thing's for sure, she'll make that team better. And the Fever will be left wondering how they ever let her slip away. If Sophie Cunningham truly walks away, the ripple effect inside the Indiana Fever could be absolutely enormous. Losing her wouldn't just hurt the box score, it would shake the very foundation of a team that was finally learning how to win together. Sophie's toughness, efficiency, and leadership helped Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston settle into a rhythm that made the Fever watchable again. Without her, the team's chemistry suddenly looks fragile, and the locker room balance could collapse faster than anyone expects. The Fever spent the last 2 seasons building an identity around unity and selflessness, and Sophie Cunningham was the glue that held those ideals together. When things got heated on the floor, she was the one calming Clark down or pushing teammates to refocus. That kind of voice is rare, especially on a young team where egos are still forming. Take that away, and you risk losing the culture entirely. The bigger concern is what message this sends to the rest of the roster. If a player like Sophie, who gave everything and asked for little, is undervalued, what does that say to the others? Players notice things like that. It changes how they approach contract talks, how they trust management, even how they compete on the floor. Fans, too, are starting to lose patience. Social media is filled with posts questioning whether the Fever's front office really understands what it's doing. People still remember the draft pick they traded away to get Sophie, and now, that move looks even worse. It's the kind of blunder that can haunt a franchise for years if the team backslides again. Caitlin Clark may be the star, but stars need stability, shooters to space the floor, defenders to take pressure off, and teammates who believe in the mission. Sophie was all of that. And if she's gone, Indiana isn't just losing a player, it's losing its backbone. Sophie Cunningham's situation with the Indiana Fever isn't just another roster shakeup. It's a mirror reflecting a much deeper issue across the WNBA. Too many teams are mismanaging talent, prioritizing short-term moves over long-term growth. Instead of nurturing chemistry and development, franchises chase headlines, veteran names, or front office comfort zones. Sophie's quiet exit is the perfect example of how good players get lost in the politics of a league still struggling to balance loyalty and business. In theory, the WNBA preaches empowerment and opportunity. But in practice, players like Sophie, hardworking, low-drama professionals who give everything, too often get overlooked the moment money enters the conversation. Sophie Cunningham's potential departure from Indiana exposes how easily teams can undervalue consistency. While social media thrives on star rivalries and viral drama, the real story is how vital role players are treated like expendable pieces. Without them, teams crumble, superstars burn out, and fans lose connection to the heart of the game. And Indiana isn't the only culprit. Across the league, franchises keep making the same mistake, letting glue players walk while pouring resources into fading stars or flashy names. It's a cycle that keeps the WNBA's middle class underpaid and underappreciated. The irony? Players like Sophie are the very reason these teams stay competitive in the first place. For Caitlin Clark, now the face of women's basketball, this moment could be a massive wake-up call. Even the brightest stars can't win without structure, depth, and loyalty from the organization behind them. If Sophie's exit signals instability inside Indiana, other players may start questioning their own futures too. Because at the end of the day, Sophie's story isn't just about a contract. It's about how the WNBA treats its backbone, the ones who do the dirty work, lift the stars, and rarely get the spotlight. And if that doesn't change soon, fans may realize the league's biggest losses aren't always on the scoreboard. Sophie Cunningham's uncertain future with the Indiana Fever is more than a roster decision. It's a test of what this franchise truly values. She gave them leadership, defense, and heart. Yet her loyalty is being met with silence. For Caitlin Clark and the Fever, this could be the turning point that defines who they really are. Will Indiana protect the players who make their culture strong, or repeat the same mistakes that keep them rebuilding year after year? Because if Sophie walks, it won't just be a loss on the court. It'll be a loss of heart.